There was an unusual late-night hearing held by Congress tonight regarding the IRS emails and Lois Lerner. Trey Gowdy was allowed to do some questioning, and as usual, he's always good, and I've got it here for you.
Mr. Gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. George, I want you to take heart, and I want you to be heartened by the fact that when one side has good facts, they pound the facts, and when they have good law, they pound the law, and when they don't have either facts or law, then they like to pound the judge. And that's what we've been listening to tonight. I've heard more questions and tougher questions directed to you than I've heard directed to Lois Lerner. So I want you to take heart, and we'll get back to this bipartisanship here towards the end, because I'd like to invite my friends from the other side of the aisle to write a letter to the Department of Justice. Speaking of the appearance of partisanship, we have a DOJ lawyer who contributed the maximum to the president, and that's who's supposed to be investigating. So perhaps, Mr. Chairman, we could have a letter, and we could get some Democrats to sign that letter with us, that we can ask the Department of Justice to update us on the status of the investigation and whether or not Ms. Boserman is the right person to conduct that investigation. However, Mr. Camus, I want to ask you this. Mr. Koskinen, Commissioner Koskinen, in June of 2014, said that there was no evidence of criminal wrongdoing, which I found to be stunning because I was not aware previously that he was a criminal investigator. I thought he was the commissioner of the IRS. So I think we both learned something that night. He had conducted a full investigation and found no criminal wrongdoing, which I found also stunning because the Ways and Means Committee had made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. So to the extent Mr. Koskinen is watching tonight, are there potential criminal statutes at play?
Yes, there could be. Yes, sir.
Well, what could they be? I'm not asking you to prejudge it, but you can't discriminate against someone based on their political ideology, can you?
No.
No, that's against the law, and thank the Lord for it. And you can't disclose confidential taxpayer information, can you?
No, you cannot.
No, you cannot. Nor can you mislead Congress, can you?
You cannot.
Could I ask the chairman to engage in a colloquy with me? Mr. Chairman, I listen, and he is my friend from Virginia, Mr. Connolly. I don't want to say that publicly. It may hurt him in this district, but he is my friend. I'll listen to him. Ask Mr. George to respond to a letter that he had written asking for an update on something that clearly Mr. George has no jurisdiction over and can't respond to. And I would be curious as to whether or not the chairman would ask our friends on the other side of the aisle if they would be willing to write a letter to the Department of Justice. I'd be curious how Ms. Boserman was chosen out of all the competent, and there are lots and lots of competent attorneys in the Department of Justice. I am curious why she, as a max-out donor to the president, was picked to head this criminal investigation. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd be interested in whether or not there's even been a grand jury that's been convened. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd be interested in whether or not any grand jury subpoenas have been issued, either for documents or for witnesses. And I'd be interested in whether or not there are any proffer agreements or whether they've made any effort to talk to Ms. Lerner. You and I didn't have any success talking to her. I was hoping that they would have more success. So I would ask the chairman to investigate, given this bipartisan spirit that I heard tonight, asking our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join in a letter with us, asking for an update on the real investigation. Not investigating the investigator, which is what I've heard a lot of tonight.
Would my friend...
But actually, I will in just a second, and I will, I promise. Not investigating the investigator, which I've heard a lot of tonight, Mr. George, but the real underlying investigation into whether criminal conduct was engaged in. Would the chairman be willing to entertain that thought?
Yes, I will follow up with that.
And I thank the gentleman from Utah, and I would yield with great trepidation to my friend from Virginia.
I thank my friend, and he also is my friend. Now, I'm not a fancy country lawyer from South Carolina like my friend. But I would say it's a neat trick to attack folks on partisanship, but to try to nullify our concerns about that very subject here with respect to Mr. George himself. The objectivity of Mr. George is very much in doubt. And if my friend wants to draw us into a letter questioning the objectivity of the partisan activities of a lawyer at the department, we're happy to entertain that if my friend will join us in the concerns that were enumerated by Mr. Cartwright and by myself in a 26-page complaint about the partisan briefings and the violation of the IG handbook. And by the way, if we're going to condemn people or raise questions by insinuation of their partisan affiliations, we could do that with Mr. George too, because he is a partisan history.
Reclaiming my time because I'm out of time, and I know the chairman's going to let me make one conclusory comment. This is I think the third time Mr. George has appeared before this committee. So my point to the gentleman from Virginia is simply this: what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If this man is going to have to sit here and listen to accusations about his character and his partiality, then I think the least that can be done is that we can have a few questions to the Department of Justice. I'm not prejudging Ms. Boserman. I have no idea. I just find it curious, out of all the thousands of lawyers in the Department of Justice, why they stumbled upon one who was a max-out donor to the DNC. That was my question, and I know I'm out of time, so I'll yield back to the chair.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence, for 5 minutes.